Hi, this is Gail over at White Fox Bead Studio. Today I'm going to show you how to make a project with memory wire. I'm actually going to sit and string it with you, so we're going to do it from start to finish. We're going to start with some memory wire, a strand of cool assorted check glass beads, but I want to add to that. I want to add some color, so I have picked out some vintage glass beads and some other vintage glass beads. I think purple is going to look really, really great with this. And then to pick up that gold with those little olive-shaped beads, I'm going to add in some gold spacers here. These are a nice tiara cast pewter spacer. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is cut this strand. You know what? I'm going to cut it at the end because I kind of like the order that this is in, and I'm not going to improve on it. I think it's nice and random and pretty. So I'm just going to cut the end off, and then we can pull the beads off as we go. I've got a pretty large coil here, so I'm going to not cut it because I'm not sure how long this is going to be. That's one of the cool things about memory wire is if it goes around once, twice, doesn't matter, it's going to be a fun bracelet. One of the things I do want to talk about, though, are these vintage glass beads. It's a pretty purple bead, but notice that it's oblong and the hole size is fairly small. Memory wire is curved, so we're going to have a little bit of a problem getting that curved wire through this thin straight hole. So when you're choosing beads for your projects, what you want to do is check your beads, see if they're going to actually fit on the memory wire and go around that. Longer bugle beads are also not going to work for this. So I'm going to take this bead and set it aside because we're not going to use that one. Of course, for demonstration purposes, I anticipated that and I picked out these purple ones that are still oblong, but they've got a nice big hole to use instead. So let's start stringing. I'm just gonna try and not drop them. I'm gonna start stringing these on. Try not to move around too much for you. I'll throw a purple one in there. And maybe what I'll do with these gold spacers, I'm taking that purple one off and I'll just kind of set off that gold and bracket that purple bead with the gold spacer. There we go. Okay, so that sets it off very nicely. And then one last big green bead. Okay, that is going to be a pretty bracelet. Look at that. Okay. Alright, it's going to overlap. By the time it gets on my wrist, it's going to be about like that. So you want to have a little bit of overlap. If you really wanted to, you could do this around as many times as you wanted and make a nice big cuff bracelet. But we're going to stop here for now because I want to show you the technique for bending your memory wire. And for this, I'm going to grab a pair of sturdy round nose pliers. I'm going to try and do this without knocking the video camera off its tripod. And to make your loop, I'm going to be adding crimp covers on this in a little bit. So what I want to do is I want to show you how to make a small loop so that you can get a crimp cover over it. So sturdy pliers, I'm using the Wubbers brand, the large ones, which I love. They're very, very strong. And you're going to grab that end of the wire and just bend it around, but not quite all the way, because if we were to make a loop with this, what's going to happen is that loop's going to be too big to put that crimp cover over it. So if you bend it a little bit and then take some chain nose pliers like so, this is really hard to do to make sure that you see it. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to squish it a little bit, and it doesn't have to be perfectly round because we're going to cover that. And it wants to slip a little bit, but that's okay. So we've got a little bit of a loop there. We're going to cover that with a crimp cover later on, and our beads are not going to slide off that end. That's the important part. Get this part out. There we go. Okay. Now, take all these beads. Actually, you know what? I'm going to leave it in because it's important for you to see every step of this process, I think. I'm going to leave this in. And I want to leave about that much. That's about 1/4 of an inch. I want to make sure that my beads are snug all the way up against the other side. And this is the part where you really need to start holding on to the thing so you don't drop your beads all over the place. Okay, if you remember one thing from watching this video, I want it to be that you always use memory wire cutters to cut that hardened steel wire that makes it keep its memory in its shape. When I cut that strand of beads earlier, I used my nice Italian nippers that are so nice, and if I were to use this on these, that would ruin them. So, memory wire cutters, about 1/4 of an inch. If you're cutting a tip off and not a whole thing, if it's likely to fly off, make sure you're wearing eye protection or that everybody around you is. You don't want that flying across the room and hitting somebody in the eye. And be mindful of your pets too. I'm going to carefully grab that. Okay, now I'm going to hold on to this. Grab it with the chain nose pliers. Make my loop. If you need to grab it again, you can. There we go. Loop's almost done, but now, okay, see it's wanting to slide in there. I want to pull it and grip it with those chain nose pliers. And squish it a little bit. Now, another thing you want to do is only do this once. If you undo that loop, this is hardened steel, and that wire is going to become so brittle that it's just going to break off. So you got one shot at that loop, and that's it. But that's okay. Memory wire is not an expensive material, and you saw how little time that actually took to string up. So we're going to pause it here for a second. Okay, we're back, and what we're going to do is put a crimp cover over this loop. Really, you could just leave it like this. This is hardly noticeable. It's keeping the beads on. It's doing its job, and it fits very nicely. I'm going to try and show you that without knocking the camera over. Okay, there's the finished bracelet. Now, if you want to put crimp covers over it, you can use chain nose pliers for this. You can use a crimp tool. The thing that you want to remember is that we're not crimping it, we're not squishing it. We are just covering that little loop at the end. So, I'm hoping you can see this okay. If this isn't perfectly straight, it wants to roll around. So the timing needs to be right. I want to slip it over and just gently close it over that loop. This takes a few tries. I still don't get it right the first time every time. But if you can do it, see I'm squishing it. Okay, it's not nice and pretty and round, but you can adjust that a little bit by just gently pressing on it and shaping it. And that is a beautiful, beautiful finish. It's secure, it's not going to fall off. It gives a nice bead-like finish to the end. Maybe you can see it better if there's a background down there. Okay. And add one to the other side, and then you're done. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous bracelet. Very pretty for summertime.